Dispatchers, and welcome to another exciting day in the Writer's Haven. I am your host, V. Helena, and today in studio with me is author Sandra Manigault. She's back in the Haven to discuss her recently released novel, Vanessa, the Next Chapter. Sandra was a season 1 guest on the show back in 2017 when she was a first-time novelist. And since then, she's gotten many accolades and has experienced great success with her novel, Vanessa. We want to hear all about that and more about her new projects. So put your hands together for author Sandra Manigault. Hello, Sandra.
Hi.
Welcome back to the Haven.
Great to be back.
So I
Great
think you were my third guest back in 2017, and oh my gosh, like I was telling you earlier when we were in the green room, I shudder when I look at those shows.
Why?
Well, because I was still, learning, getting my show off the ground, and making mistakes behind the scenes. I hope our audience didn't catch a lot of that stuff, but we are new and improved in season 5. But being one of the first guests that we had, I hope it was a good experience.
It was great. You were great in season 1.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank
it's
you.
true.
But I'm glad that you're back, and I'm glad that we're here to talk about your new book, Vanessa, the Next Chapter. Now, let's talk about the first book, which is Vanessa, a Love Story.
Right.
What you came in to talk to us about in 2017. Talk to us about some of how receptive the audience has been, the readers have been about that book, and some of the things that you've been doing since then.
Okay. The readers loved it.
Of course.
The women loved it. And it took me a while to figure out what was resonating with them about that book. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what it was at first, except finally it occurred to me it had as much to do with the man in her life at that time as it did with Vanessa herself.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me, oh my goodness, he's like an archetype. Every woman meets that man. Mm-hmm. The question is, how does he affect your life?
Right.
And I was hearing from women of all ages, and even very young women who were just in college, they were saying, oh my goodness, I met him already. And I'm thinking, oh, already?
That's probably not a bad thing.
Yeah, well, maybe. depends. But and then the next thing I found out, people were saying, I couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
And I heard that so much, I thought to myself, what's wrong with these women? And so I'd be journaling in the morning, which is something I did a lot. Mm-hmm. I do that from time to time. And I'd stop journaling and I'd pick up the book and I would just open arbitrarily and start reading. 20 minutes later, I'd be saying, Sandra, what are you doing? You just read so many pages. You're supposed to be journaling, not reading your own book. Mm-hmm. And so I think there was something about the style or the flow of the story that got their attention. And then the stories about staying up till 3 in the morning to finish the book, this kind of thing. Yeah, so I guess one could say I like the book.
People getting to work late because they
crazy stuff.
I heard some of that.
You did?
At your book signing.
Wow. The other thing is people were saying, well, you've got to do a sequel. And I thought they were crazy because I had no intentions of writing a sequel. And they said, well, we want to know what happens next. And so I did the sequel. And I started the sequel in a very strange way. On an airplane flying from Washington to Los Angeles, I got tired of not knowing all the countries in the map of Africa, and after going through the series about 3 times, I said, okay, let me just start writing this book. And I started writing it. And it came together pretty quickly, different kind of process.
Okay, so in writing your second novel, and I know you said earlier that this was kind of like a one-time thing. What do you mean in terms of a series or in terms of writing in general? Not writing in general. You just mean you didn't know there was going to be a second book, a sequel to this one.
I didn't know there was going to be a second book, but it came together easily, I would say. And I loved writing it. And I fell in love with the new man that shows up in the second book. And I wasn't planning to make him every woman's ideal. where he would check off all the boxes, but he was checking off all the boxes. And when that book was published, it was interesting because people were telling me things about his character that I wasn't even aware of. And he didn't have a dark side, but he had flaws, at least one, that was brought to my attention. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I wasn't even aware of it. The character came through the way it came through, but it was just interesting to hear people talk about.
So in terms of your process, it sounds like the character development kind of happens organically while you're writing, or are you planning out the characters and the nuances of each character before you actually start writing them into your story?
I don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't do that. It's very strange. I remember when I took my very first creativity course some time ago, and I was reading Julia Cameron's Artist's Way. One of the things she said is that writing should be as much listening as it is trying to think up something. So it should, rather than thinking up something to say, you should almost be taking dictation. So it's coming through you, but you're not making it up yourself. And so that kind of stuck with me, and I find that's how I write a lot of my books. It's a very strange process. And in developing character, a lot of the character development comes through in terms of the conversations between the characters. I don't know what they're going to say. I just write it down as it comes through.
Right. So you're more of a scribe, listening, like a fly on the wall, listening to these conversations and writing them down.
I am.
And I wouldn't say that that's weird or strange. I mean, I think we all have our unique way of jumping into our creativity, no matter what our art of choice is. And so with writing, it's whatever works best for you. There's no real cookie cutter way of advancing that.
That's true.
Yeah. So now between the two books, well, first of all, I want to go back to what inspired the writing. You're on a plane and you're thinking about the names of the continents in Africa, and then you say, "Oh, let me go ahead and start
the book.
And start book two."
Yeah.
And from what I understand, you just kind of went in gangbusters.
I did.
And so the inspiration kind of indirectly came from that thought of.
The inspiration came from the fact that everybody wanted a sequel.
Okay.
So that's why I got the process started.
Okay, supply and demand.
I guess so.
You heard the call and you wanted to go ahead and make that happen. And a lot of the reviews, I mean, I've heard people say, like as I said earlier, that at your book signing, people were there talking about they couldn't wait to get their hands on the sequel.
Yeah.
And then in other reviews that I've read about the book, there were a lot of people that were very complimentary about your writing. And for it to be your first novel, that's absolutely impressive. So, and I'm sure I asked you this in season one.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask it again because I'm curious to see what your response is going to be now that you've completed the process a second time and you're actually working on a third book, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
When you were writing the first novel, the inspiration, the story and the characters and all of that came from?
It started in a creative writing class.
Right.
And in
as
the
an
class,
assignment?
Yes. In the class, we had to write a scene in which sex was or was not the inevitable outcome. That was one option out of, I'm going to say, 6 or 7 that the instructor gave us. So I chose the one where it was going to be the inevitable outcome. And for some reason, I placed the story in the Southwest at an event at a university, and Vanessa was at this event, and that's where she met Miguel.
Okay, and so it was an exercise, but even then you had to kind of conjure up these characters and the storyline. None of that was given to you.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So,
it was conjured
where
up.
do you think that you pulled pulled those characters?
Yeah. I'm not sure where Vanessa came from. I'm not sure where her name came from. as far as Miguel is concerned, like I say, we've all met him somewhere. And so the energy that defined Miguel, that was easy to conjure up.
Yeah.
That was not difficult. You know, he was just who he was. And
Well,
she just fell for it.
Yeah. And I asked because, I mean, not only is it beautifully written, which is a testament to your storytelling abilities, but also just in the way that you develop the characters and how you birth them, and kind of juxtaposing that with what you were saying about, you know, basically being a scribe and hearing the characters, and because you birth them, you uniquely have a relationship with them. So you know what they would say, you know how they would say it, you know the situations they would find themselves in. And so I just think that that is a testament to, again, your storytelling abilities and your creativity in general. So between book 1 and book 2, what were some of the challenges that you faced in book 1 that may have continued on as a challenge in book 2, or maybe you've learned some lessons in how to deal with certain challenges? What are some of the things that you learned from your experience with book 1 that kind of carried over into book 2 and writing that?
That's a good question. I'm not even sure how to answer that.
I try to come up with good questions.
Book 2 was written differently, and I'm hoping I'm going to answer your question by describing how it came about. My daughter insisted I get an iPad, so I got an iPad, which I only used for writing, essentially, book 2. And I found the iPad on my lap. No matter where I was, it was always with me, no matter what I was doing. And a paragraph here, a page or two there, and so it just kind of spilled out. I realized I wanted a couple of things to happen in book 2. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to grow. But I also wanted some closure as far as some of the other characters who we met in book 1. I didn't want to just leave them hanging there. And as one friend told me, why'd you bring all these men back? And I thought, because I wanted to. But I think the closure, I'm hoping the closure occurred in book 2, as far as what happened to this person, what happened to that person. Yeah. But there were so many new characters introduced in book 2. So I think the one thing I learned that carried over is that conversation was easy for me to write. And I don't know quite how that came about, except I remember being in another class with a different teacher, and she kept talking about the difference between show and tell. And I know what the telling is, but the showing comes through when you can see what they're doing and hear what they're saying. That's the show. So the show was easy for me.
So with the publishing of book 1 and book 2, you're saying that you were prompted to self-publish because of the experience that you were having with the publishers. Did you think about maybe getting an agent or looking for an agent to shop it around for you?
Nope.
Yeah, because as you know, a lot of publishers...
Yeah, and the strange thing with the book for Math Empowerment, I published that in '97. That book is still on Amazon, 22 years later, which is amazing to me. And it's literally gone worldwide. I wish I could say I made a ton of money. I did not, but the book got out there and the message behind the book got out there, and I'm glad about that.
Okay, so speaking of messages, what would you say well, let's take them book by book.
Okay.
So Vanessa, the love story, what was the main message that you wanted to put out there?
Oh, wow.
Well, first tell me the target audience, and then what message, if there was one that you wanted to...
No particular message, target audience women.
Because there's a lot of messaging in your book.
Yeah.
I just want to know if that was intentional.
Yeah, I've heard. I wasn't intending for men to gravitate to it, but some have. And I remember at the book signing we did for book 2, one of the husbands asked, how did you determine how a man thinks? Because that's what he could see reading Vanessa, a love story that was on his wife's night table. And I thought to myself, well, a little bit from my husband. You ask a question or two and get an answer you're not expecting. I remember asking my husband at one point the question, I said, I don't understand how a man can say I had sex with this woman, but it didn't mean anything. I don't get that. And I don't think women intrinsically get that. And so Donald looked at me and he said to me, you got to eat, don't you? And my mouth dropped open. And I used that in a scene in Vanessa, a Love Story, where a group of people are out together for dinner, a group of academics who are at a conference. They're out together having a good time over a dinner at a famous restaurant. And no, I think it's after that. They're together, but they're still having a conversation, and they're still in the context of this conference. And they're discussing the way men think versus the way women think. And that particular topic comes up, and one of the men says
the topic
of how men can have sex and not
with no emotion,
with no emotional attachment to the woman they just had it with. And one of the young men says, sex is like food to us. We've got to have it, nothing personal. And the women, crack up and give each other high fives, because I was kind of paraphrasing what Donald said, but through the words of the character Freddie. So, but as far as a message, yes, I guess there were a lot of messages, but they were not intentional. They just kind of fell into place. They were fun to write. Again, the showing rather than the telling.
Right, because with the people that I talked to about your book, and just a lot of them felt that there was a lot of a woman being empowered, and that in a relationship, and that was what resonated with them. That's what they connected with in reading it. And then, of course, it's kind of salacious to some degree. So there's that factor that, if nothing else, that will keep you focused on reading it and getting to the end. You had an affair situation in there. You had an artist, and that whole dynamic of the stereotypical, but I think sometimes very true about artists, I'll say generally speaking, in terms of how they approach their art and what their art means, and the freedom of the art, and how that transfers into other areas of their life. And then there's the wife that kind of sort of maybe knows something's going on, and just how that person deals with it. So then there's the woman who didn't even know she was having an affair with a man because it wasn't revealed. So I mean, you have all of these different dynamics, and at the end, where people fall or fell, where they fell after the smoke cleared, where they were. And then in book 2, as you said, just kind of tying up those loose ends, because you do want to know what happened with Miguel. Did he ever leave I didn't get the impression he ever left his wife. Did he leave his wife?
I'm not even sure myself. They didn't live together. They did not live together. That much I knew. And of course, she shows up at a very inopportune time for Vanessa. Maybe Vanessa is where she's not supposed to be when she finds out that the wife is still around. But
then there's also that message of kind of, some would say she fell too fast. She was just overtaken by the charm of this man. And again, that's something that women, just in general,
it can happen.
Discussions about relationships kind of either have found themselves in at least once in their life, going back to the point that you made at the top of our
everyone meets him. They meet him. They what meet happens him. Is another story. But when you see the personality, it's apparent. Gee, I've met this character somewhere before. And I think women do. What I think also is interesting, originally I wanted them to get together, and I discussed that dilemma with Donald, my husband, and he said something interesting. He said, "Why don't you let them break up?" And I thought, oh, so then it was a matter of how. and then creating the whole scenario where the breakup would be dramatic and life-shattering and all the rest of it.
So Sandra, let's talk a little bit about the marketing for book 1 and for book 2 before we go into talking about your newest project, which I can't wait to hear more about. So when you were here in season 1,
right,
the book was finished and you were just starting on the marketing journey. Talk a little bit about what that experience has been.
Oh, it's been frustrating.
Okay.
That's honest.
No, and that's great. That's great to hear. I mean, it's not great that it was frustrating, but it's good that you're going to talk about that.
I probably reached out to everybody I knew, and many of them bought the book. And I found that I'd be places and start talking about the book. I was at a little bed and breakfast in California talking about the book, and a couple of ladies bought the book on the airplane, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, I've seen you've done book signings.
I did some book signings, did some, book parties, you could call it.
With book clubs?
Yeah, that worked. I found distributorship was not an easy thing to get. So I basically sold books through my website and through the events I was having. I find the marketing to be the most challenging of the whole book producing process. It's easy. It's far easier to write it. It is somewhat less easy to publish it. It is most difficult to get it marketed properly. And I'm still struggling with that, and I'm still working on that. And people say, oh, you should do an audiobook. Well, that would be great, but then there'll be the same issue with selling the audiobook as selling the paperback book. So it's just a matter of trying new things and just getting more people to help you do what you have to do.
Social media been a part of your marketing strategy?
Some. I find that doesn't really do it either. It's like there is no magic. For me, there is no magic bullet. You have to be able to do a lot of things. And because there are other things going on in my life, I don't always get to all the other things.
Okay.
So it's a process.
It is a process. And, you know, the more that you write and the more that you put yourself as an author, as a personality out there, and speaking with other authors, they have found that to also work for them because the personality will transition to, well, what has she written?
That's
kind
true.
Of thing, and picking it up, and so that's one avenue.
I find also that when I do women's events, conferences, or a book club event, I do a lot better because it's a matter of giving something of value that they want, because sometimes people, yes, they want to meet an author, but it's not always about you, because other women want to write too. So I like to address that, and I like doing writing workshops for women's organizations. And I find that once I'm there and have a chance to talk with them and talk about what I've gone through, but also show them how they can make it happen in their lives, then they're much more amenable to buying anything I've got, in terms of whether it's the memoir, whether it's the novel or the pair of novels. And so I find that for me, that's probably the best way to market. It's a matter of getting the events. But the women, you know, enjoy the events, and hopefully they have a big takeaway from the events and learn something about themselves and release that inertia that keeps women from writing their own stories or their own poetry or whatever they want to do.
Okay, let's talk about Flora.
Oh, yes.
So Flora, we met Flora in book 1.
Yes.
And she was with us in book 2.
Yes.
And now she has her own
book.
Story.
Yes, she does. She does. And I remember telling one of my editors that I wanted to name the third book Flora's Saga. And she says, well, I don't know if I'd name it Flora's Saga. And I thought to myself, I want to name it Flora's Saga because that's exactly what it is. Her story is complicated. And it starts off with a very empowered Flora who is very, very confident and gorgeous and busy and everything until she meets someone who sweeps her off her feet. The problem is her person she sees as marriage material, and that's a problem because when you know you want to marry this person, you're so concerned with dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and doing everything perfectly. And that's how we get started with Flora Saga. By the way, Flora Saga begins on the same day that book 2 ends.
Okay.
So it's the third book.
Okay.
And Valerie, I had no idea I'd end up with a trilogy, and I like to think the trilogy, what are we going to call it? The Vanessa trilogy.
So what inspired that book?
Realizing Flora deserved her own story.
Yeah.
She really
did. She was
did.
a pretty powerful
She
personality in book 1 and
was.
2. So
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah, so there's a whole new cast of characters that comes through. And of course, Vanessa is there, and the man who becomes part of Vanessa's life in book 2 is there. But they're peripheral characters this time.
Okay.
And so we meet other people.
And when is that book set to be released?
I'm looking at about Valentine's Day.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to try my best to do it in 2019, but that wasn't going to happen. So I think Valentine's Day is kind of a good release for a great love story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds exciting. I'm very happy that you have continued on this journey, even though you didn't see book 2 or book 3 on the horizon.
I didn't.
That you've allowed your creative juices to work in a way that would bring further life to existing characters, new life to new characters, and bottom line, more reading enjoyment.
I hope so.
For your loyal and diehard fans, myself included. I love your writing.
You.
Love your writing, and we have to get more exposure out there for it. So thank you so much for being in the Haven and spending time with us. And Dreamcatchers, thanks for tuning in. And keep watching, because we still have much to share on the artistry of writing. If you've been tuning in, you know we have a number of authors, songwriters, filmmakers, and playwrights who will be joining us here in the Haven. So check our website for more information about who's stopping by at www.writershavenshow.com. And you will also find information on our website about how you can stream our show on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Sonos, Alexa, and other platforms, including the American Legacy Network. So that's all for now. And until next time, catch fire on purpose. Hello, dreamy people, and welcome to another exciting season of the Writers Haven Show. I'm V. Helena, your host and executive producer. Since 2017, we've invited you into the Haven, where we showcase the passion, process, and projects of writers of literature, television, film, and music. Over 2.5 million of you are tuning in to one of 23 channels or streaming us on iHeartRadio, Sonos, Spreaker, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Alexa, and YouTube. We appreciate the love and hope our programming inspires and motivates you. We drop new episodes every week, so subscribe and never miss a show. I want to stay connected to you, so hit me up socially on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr at Author V. Helena at Writers Haven Show with V. Helena. I look forward to seeing you in the Haven, and until next time, catch fire on purpose.